Hello and welcome to Whale News. Now, May and June have been very busy schedule wise for me. So, some of these stories have been written ahead of time. So, our first story this month is a continuation of our May story. Timmy the Humpback Whale has been released, but has unfortunately passed away. So, to give a recap, in April, a male humpback whale beached in the Baltic Sea, far from its native habitat. Now, extensive efforts were made to free it, which were successful initially. It, however, then beached another two times. This indicates that the whale was very sick, and he was also suspected to have been entangled and also boat struck. Due to the strandings and the low salinity of the Baltic Sea, he started having a degraded skin condition and likely had some internal organ damage when he stranded. Adult humpback whales weigh up to 40 tons, so large whales like this are adapted to support such weight in water because the buoyancy balances out against the gravity. If they are stranded, their organs can actually collapse under their own weight. Animal welfare groups and scientific experts were saying that the most humane thing to do was to let nature take him. This is because, due to his injuries and repeated stranding, it was highly unlikely that he would even survive if he managed to somehow be transported to his native waters. At the beginning of May, the humpback whale was actually pulled onto a barge with a pull, and this barge was then pulled out into the Baltic Sea in a rescue attempt funded by private donors. He was then released into the sea, supposedly with a tag to give vitals and maybe a location. But this isn't very clear from many sources. This release was very questionable. The tag reportedly didn't work, and he was also reportedly released into a shipping lane. He was released earlier than he should have been. Multiple reports suggest that the scientists and veterinary staff were not informed and were not allowed to witness the release. One even described it as them dumping the whale. In mid May, Timmy was unfortunately found washed up dead on a Danish coast. These efforts, while well intentioned, only served to prolong his suffering. This story should be a very stark reminder that while the best of intentions is important in conservation, so is knowledge and education. And in the absence of that, trusting that the experts know their subject and care for these animals. When experts warn against attempts like this, they should be listened to. €1.5 million was spent to save this one whale, but if that was spent on associations and divers that clear up the oceans of fishing gear, or towards the development of more environmentally friendly and economical viable gear for fishermen to use, or even educational programs about dangers that this gear poses, then you could be saving more than just one whale life. Our next story is that in the Northern Hemisphere, various countries have begun whaling again. So, in the Faroe Islands, one of the most barbaric and brutal whale hunts in the world has started its annual cycle. Boats herded pilot whales and dolphins into shallows, a large portion of which were calves and pregnant females. 125 pilot whales were killed. We're going to spare you the barbaric details of how these whales were killed, but it includes a considerable, long drawn out suffering on part of the whales, which are among the most intelligent animals on the planet in terms of actual intelligence and emotional intelligence. And they are very family orientated. This only serves to increase their suffering. The whale meat from these pilot whales are considered toxic. This hunt is an occurrence that happens multiple times a year, every year, and is considered a tradition in the Faroe Islands, which makes it extremely hard to change. Change can't come from outside the Faroe Islands. This needs to come from the people of the Faroe Islands themselves, the young people of the Faroe Islands. Furthermore, the Faroe Islands government has recently changed the law to make it so that whaling, hunting, and fishing is exempt from animal welfare laws. Over in Iceland, the last remaining fin whale whaling company in Iceland has announced plans to resume whaling again in summer after 2 years. They have a quota of 150 fin whales. And fin whales take at least 10 years before they're capable of producing offspring, with a calving interval of roughly 2 to 3 years. This practice has not been financially profitable for years, and most of the whale meat is shipped to Japan. The Japanese demand for this has also been dropping. Speaking of Japan, they have also started their whaling campaign for this year, targeting 2,000 tons of whale meat, primarily of brides and minke whales. A bride's whale can weigh up to 40 tons, with minke's quite a bit less. They are also doing an exhibition in Japan to try and boost the sales of whale meat after the natural trend is turning away from whale meat. The demand is plummeting over there. Now, what's worse is that while this demand is dropping, the government of Japan are subsidizing this industry, allowing them to keep in business for no reason, really. Unfortunately, despite lowering demand, there's actually very little pushback in Japan by Japanese people against the actual act of whaling. Our next news story is the start of a bit of a two-parter here, unfortunately. So, in early May, a grey whale in the Salish Sea, known as CRC 2688, was hit by a jet ski, seen by viewers as well. Now, this was caught on camera. In the days that followed, the whale was spotted several times and miraculously did not sustain any injuries and was seen feeding and behaving normally. The jet ski pilot was reported by eyewitnesses to be piloting recklessly, weaving in and out of boats and passing several times. Footage of the impact was captured from the shore as the whale surfaced and the jet ski hit it. And this jet ski was likely going way too fast for the pilot to be able to react and avoid the whale. And from the footage I saw, it is hard to see if any of the boats in the water were signaling that a whale was present. Usually, whale watching vessels in the area will have a white flag with the whale fluke on it to alert people of a whale, and they will sometimes have some yellow warning lights. Now, from the video, I could not see if this was the case. Maybe this was the case. Maybe it was off camera. However, given the speed and recklessness of the pilot, it's probable that this wouldn't have made a difference. So, local people to where this occurred launched a petition on change.org, and this petition was actually heard. It was put up to a vote to ban jet skis and sea-doos, which on the 1st of June, unfortunately, the vote did not pass. This year, there have been an extremely high rate of grey whale fatalities, unfortunately, in the Northwest Pacific. As of the 24th of May, which point I wrote my notes, as of the 24th of May, there have been 22 grey whales found dead. I do note that this number is no longer accurate because there have been more since then. And most of these seem to be malnourished. And a couple had blunt force trauma, and also some of them had signs of recent entanglement as well. This is the most in a single year at this point of the year to date. The vast majority of these showed signs of malnutrition. So this is suspected to be the leading cause behind this. And if it's not the leading cause, it's at least a very strong force multiplier. Now, it is important to note that while these whales do travel through waters with big orcas, there is no indication to suggest that there's been elevated levels of predation. Transient killer whales will only really hunt grey whale calves. The real issue here is the lack of food available to the grey whale. These grey whales, which grey whales only live in the North Pacific. So these grey whales will feed upon small invertebrates which are found in the sands of the Arctic seas. They'll eat in the Arctic Circle and then they'll travel to Mexican waters for breeding and for giving birth. However, during this period, they're mostly fasting, which means that they're not eating. So they'll fill up in the Arctic, then they'll come down to Mexico, give birth or mate, and then they'll go back up. And in that entire time, they are not eating themselves. And if they have given birth to a calf as well, they'll also be lactating as well. But because their food sources are in the Arctic, this makes them extremely susceptible to climate change. And without sufficient food, their reproductive rate is extremely low because they need to be in a good body condition to be able to reproduce. Now, the deaths this year, as mentioned by the Marine Education and Research Society, is nothing new in the struggles of grey whales. But it is a really, really big wake up call, and it's the most visible effect of something that's been happening for several years now. The trend of low calving rate has been going on for several years, and this extraordinary death rate of grey whales this year is only the most visible sign of an underlying decline in their population. The most alarming thing is that they are just not reproducing enough. That being said, these deaths that are recorded are mostly from strandings, which means that because a whale carcass typically is very rare to actually wash up on a beach or even be found by people. I think someone in a webinar that I watched mentioned between 10 to 20%. You then can infer from that there are so many more grey whales that are dying out to sea that we don't know about. Scientists are calling upon the Canadian government to recognise that all grey whales that pass along the Canadian coast are an endangered species. Endangered isn't just a word to throw out when there's few animals left. Being recognised as an endangered species triggers legal obligations to protect these animals. The endangered species list is a tool to determine which species need the heaviest focus in terms of conservation. Some of the measures that would help these grey whales are protection of their feeding areas, including of alternate feeding areas, but also protections relating to reducing boat risks. Because as we talked about just the previous story, grey whales are at threat from boats and even jet skis. Some actions may have very small effects, but if a lot of actions that have small effects are taken, this will end up having a large effect. Now, while this story is mostly about grey whales, we have to acknowledge the stranding and passing of a rare fin whale, which occurred in the Salish Sea. I'm in a Discord group with people who live in the Salish Sea, and the mood was very somber when that fin whale was discovered stranded, especially those that had seen the very same whale just days prior. So at the end of May, a video surfaced that went kind of viral. And this was a video that was taken off the coast of Argentina. And this was an interaction between an orca and a kayaker. And this was somewhat of a pretty near miss. This is on one of the kind of beaches that orcas sometimes catch sea lion pups and elephant seals. Now, the video shows a male orca, PTN006, and nicknamed Pow. And apparently, according to one of the researchers from Hunter Orca Research, I hope I pronounced that right. I hope I didn't butcher that pronunciation. I contacted them, and one of the researchers gave me a little bit of insight. And this particular orca typically does this thing where he'll approach something that he doesn't know whether it's food or not, and he'll break off to the side at the very last second if it doesn't end up being food. So the theory behind this is that this orca mistook the kayaker with the sound from the paddles of the oars, thought that it was either an elephant seal or a sea lion pup, and therefore potential prey. So he was in hunting mode, and that's why you see him accelerate towards the kayaker, and then he turns away just before he like gets to attack the kayaker, and the kayaker actually goes in the water. And that's the point where the orca seems to realize that this is a human, this is not a seal. Now, orcas have never intentionally harmed a person in the wild. There are A very few, as few as maybe two instances where an orca has made a near miss with a human in the wild. But these cases all seem to be a case of mistaken identity. A mistake that the orcas involved realized and averted before they actually did any kind of harm. Orcas do not show aggression towards humans in the wild, but we do always have to remember that they are apex predators, and we are lucky that they don't see us as food sources. So we also have to respect their status as apex predators, knowing that they could potentially do something, but they choose not to. So, on to some more positive news, some scientific news now. Now, scientists from NOAA and the Oregon State University have conducted a new study on a scientific sampling technique called environmental DNA barcoding. This is the act of taking DNA samples from seawater in the vicinity of a group of dolphins, for instance. And the study looked at how effective the technique is at estimating genetic diversity within populations of some of the more abundant dolphin species. This technique reportedly allows mass sample collection, as well as being considerably easier and less invasive to collect. They're not trying to collect, well, mucus with the cup on a pole. They're just collecting seawater that is in the water behind where the dolphins were. They found that eDNA, which is what it's called, is viable if done repeatedly for studying genetic diversity of an abundant species. One of the biggest things that genetic diversity can tell us is population size. Now, our last story of the day is a story that I find very difficult to be impartial on, and in fact, I've had to record it a couple of times already. I like to present things that are factual and unbiased in the news. However, this is one where I cannot ignore my own feelings. The French government has decided to send two captive orcas and 12 dolphins who are currently in the defunct marine park in France, known as Marineland, to marine parks in Spain. So the two orcas would go to Laurel Park, and the 12 dolphins would go to two other zoos. After a few years, those dolphins would return, whilst a facility in France is being built at an existing zoo to house those dolphins. To be clear, I consider this still captivity. This is not a sea sanctuary that they're going to. Now, previously, the French government had said that the two orcas would be going to the sea sanctuary in Nova Scotia, run by the Whale Sanctuary Project. But unfortunately, due to the fact that work on the Whale Sanctuary Project started late and the extreme deterioration of the tanks at Marineland, a decision has had to be rushed to send them, to condemn them to live out the rest of their lives in captivity, being exploited. Now, while there are agreements that the dolphins would return back to France, there's no such agreement to say that the orcas will then go to a sea sanctuary at any point in the future. Now, the French government were approached in 2024 regarding the Whale Sanctuary project, but there have been so many delays that is now presented a timetable which is unfeasible. There's also potential evidence captured by drone footage to suggest that there are people working to deconstruct the tanks as we speak in Marineland France, causing contamination in the water with these two orcas. These two orcas and the 12 dolphins have been stranded in this park since January 2025 when Marineland went out of business. And France also passed a law back in 2021 that prohibited the use of exotic animals in performance purposes. That includes captive whales and dolphins, but it also includes things like circuses. However, the fact that the French government has ruled in favor of sending them to another captive marine park who will exploit them just as much as Marineland did, if not worse, and a park that has an appalling animal welfare record, is an absolute slap in the face to the idea of this law. Now, according to a court-appointed team, the tanks are in advanced structural decay, and it's likely that the animals would have to be euthanized if they were not moved to a marine park. However, given how long the discussions on what to do with these orcas has gone on for, this is a problem that could have been solved a lot sooner. Their fate is now solely in the hands of Spanish decision makers who in 2025 rejected an import permit request on grounds of animal welfare, which says a lot considering this place already has orcas to begin with. Now, currently there are no sea sanctuaries active in the world that are prepared to take these orcas or dolphins who are currently ready to take them right now. This is why more work needs to be done to get some of these sea sanctuaries up and running. Because it's not just the orcas, it's also the whole situation with the beluga whales in Canada as well. So the whale sanctuary project, if it had succeeded, would have been a proof of concept and would have shown the way forward with sea sanctuaries in the future. Now, I'm going to make a full, properly researched, properly scientific, factual video in the next few months about captivity, sea sanctuaries, and how we can put an end to the captivity of whales and dolphins. However, that is going to take quite a while for me to do. So look out for that on the channel. And as an aside, I just want to mention that I refuse to show photos and videos of cetaceans in captivity. So on screen, I will have been displaying some of my own footage of whales that are not captive, showing that you don't need to go to a marine park to see these amazing intelligent animals. Thank you for watching the whale news. The next whale news video is most likely going to be towards the start of August, due to vacations and me being in the Sailor Sea. But we'll have a lot of content for you in that meantime. There might be 1 week where we miss an upload. So if you want more whale and dolphin content, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and feel free to ask questions and start discussion in the comments.